do have a few questions, so thank you for sticking around. I think I'll start with perhaps the broadest one and the one that might be the most relevant to our scholars and our audience. Um, how does public policy influence science? And how does science influence public policy?
Well, let me get that, Molly, before you, because I think this is the only reason that why I do all this. Okay, this is really for me was the turning point of in my life when in beginning of the 90s I saw science showing me that patients could be cured from breast cancer. Okay, so that was, you know, the turning point in my life. That I think if before it was like, okay, cancer, might as well have it, luck or no luck, and it's not question of luck. We know already that breast cancer can be cured in 95% of the cases if if they come soon, if they do uh, early detection, if they have the right treatment, if they have other kinds of support. So this is enough to show how science can promote all what happened afterwards. So the first time that I put people together, doctors, nurses, psychologists, and patients, to the patient together, was in 1993, 1 year after I saw this drop in the curve for the first time in breast cancer mortality. So since then, I think everything I did in my life was, and I tried to influence politics, policies because of that. The other way around, when you have a problem, when there's something that you cannot, I think, cannot deal, you have to go back to science to ask for science. Like now, the countries that they haven't listened to scientists, they are the worst in COVID performances, you know. So I think this is really intrinsic, and I'm not only talking about medical science, I'm talking about science, I'm talking about all kinds of science that can instrument our arguments or our asks, efforts.
So Molly, I'll send those same questions to you. How does public policy influence science? And how does science influence public policy?
Well, let me give a different example. In this country, the federal government spends a tremendous amount of money on research, and research that brings us medications that impact breast cancer. When somebody comes in and says we're spending too much research, the people that have been in the labs for years doing stuff, they can get totally shut down, and we can actually go backwards. So one of the things that several organizations I've worked for have put a real high priority on is government research, because you can't let it go back, or you lose all the momentum you have. And the way we have had advocates impact that, if we've had advocates who have been impacted by that research, by a certain drug, for instance, go in and talk to a legislator and say, what would have happened if somebody stopped working on that? So I think that we see that every day, that the research of the federal government literally impacts millions of lives.
Thank you. So, each of you resides in a very different country, comes from a different background. And here's a very interesting, well, this question interests me. Citizens in both Brazil and the United States are cynical about their ability to affect change, and they prefer not to get involved. What advice do you have for people with this sentiment, and how do you influence people to become involved?
if you don't mind, I'll start with that one, if that's okay, Dr. Caleffi. First of all, I think you start small. And one of the principles we used was just ask somebody to do one task. Ask somebody to go to a public event, or ask somebody to write a letter, or ask somebody to go to a meeting with a policymaker. Because what we found time and time and time and time again was people were saying, I don't like politics. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't understand how the legislature works. But if you slowly bring them in and give them a taste of it, and they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. That was pretty easy. And then you give them more training and more support. You will take these people who had no interest and turn them into raging advocates. And I've seen that work. Dr. Caleffi, I'm sure you've seen that too. I've seen that work time and time and time again. So my recommendation is always to start small and to explain what a legislator can do that can make a difference.
And I think one of the things that really convince more people to understand what we're talking about is like real cases. Okay, when people really talk from their heart or from their difficulty. So I think every time, this is why this visits to parliaments, to public hearings, or to the public audience, we do always start with a patient's case, with someone that really are going through that, or have been, or a family member or something, because it's very difficult to put yourself in other person's how say, other person's experience when you don't listen from that person or a case. So I think this is how it would be more effective. Since we started to use this modality of having real cases, I think has been very impactful.
And I would just add to that, and that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the personal story. And the people we were able to attract to doing advocacy either had a personal story, or they had a family member or a friend who had a personal story. And that opens the door. Totally agree.
So let's change the conversation from how to bring people into the organization to how to bring money into the organization. How do you acquire the resources and the funding, each of you, to do the work that needs to happen?
We only work with projects. Okay, so I think when we have a problem, like as I showed to you that every year we have a list of problems that we want to address, then we go and we draw some projects to be able to do that, and very detailed. So for this purpose, we need this. It's like the tactics that Molly just showed us, okay? And normally when you have tactics and you have the like a chronogram, when you have as entregas, how, please help me, Marcia, when you have the yields very clear, I think this is where we are more successful to be funded. So donations normally it's very difficult for us in Brazil to live on donations, and we don't have a government money at all. Okay, so it's like projects, sponsors, and people that are believing in our cause. The deliverables, we need to be really to show what they are, and then you can or not convince.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. It's it's being clear how the money will be spent. Donors want to know that their money's being spent effectively, and just outlining exactly what you're doing with it. And we have found in the past that donors get excited about organizations that are bringing advocates together. Often they'll pay for training, like foundations will pay for training. They may not want to pay for advocacy, but they're happy to pay for training. So it's really understanding that donor, or that whoever that is, and their motivation and what's going to appeal to them, and putting your fundraising pitch together that way. But the other thing we did is we were very happy to take small donations from a lot of people. And maybe people don't have a lot of money, but they want to give a little bit. And that can add up if you have a lot of people doing that.
Thank you. So what is the difference, and I'll ask each of you to answer this, in your arenas between public policy and politics?
I'm happy to start that one. Well, and it's a very easy answer, because I talked to earlier about the new advocate who says, I don't like politics. These issues aren't partisan. They're not Democratic or Republican in our country. They affect, breast cancer affects everyone. It doesn't pay attention to what political party you're from. So it's just continuing to reinforce that. And because you're right, it has a bad connotation, especially in this country, politics, especially right now. So it's just reinforcing, this is about getting public policy change. It's not about going with one party or another.
And just to add, because this is exactly what I feel about the difference between, you have to be really clever and attempt not to be used for the purpose of partisan. So I think when people say that, oh, this is politics, why not? It is, but it's no partisan. You see, yeah. I think this is the very important thing, and we are very aware, like a year of campaign, or we have to be really, really careful about that, because it's very easy to get into skepticals and criticism, and it's just one time, and then you're done. So I think NGOs in Brazil and in some other countries had a bad reputation that we work for the pharma, we work on behalf of this candidate, or is not transparent. So you have to deal every day to show that you don't get into any of these three categories, or all the three together, because there are people. Yes, it's true. There are groups like that, but you have to be careful.
And Bob, my friend Bob Chapman, who is on this call, likes to say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're going to be on the menu. So it's important to try to work with both sides.
I love that.
So our mission here at Dimension Sciences is to promote the inclusion of minorities in science in both countries, and really more than the inclusion, to really bring young and minority scientists into leadership roles in the country. What role does government have in the process of the inclusion of minorities in science?
Well, I think they have a big role. I don't know that they're taking on that role appropriately, but I'll state the obvious. They do have a role, and it's a relevant question, especially right now, Pamela. And I honestly don't know how our country is taking that on, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting that we are showing to the students, to the grantees, where they are going, what their work is going to get. Okay, how important this is for the whole picture. And I'm very, when I accept this invitation, I thought, wow, this is how even medical students, health professionals should start their careers, you know, knowing the impact of what this little seeds, how they are going to impact the whole picture. And I think this is very clever to show. And we say that we are based all our advocacy in what these people are doing. You know, this is important in cancer, in oncology. This is only what matters. It's science-based practices. We need to get this more clear, even for the patient, because it's not like I feel, I think. No, no, no. This has even is from the bench, and these guys are really, really I am a big fan of what they are doing.
So for each of you, one of the conversations that we have here with our young scientists is how they overcome barriers, whether it's the barrier of being young, of their gender, of any kind of minority status. For each of you, what barriers have you had to overcome in your career, and how did you overcome them?
That's a good question. I will say I think the biggest barrier in my career was knowing that I had this affinity for organizing, but not understanding any of the principles of it. So I taught myself, and I found mentors who could teach me. And I kept talking to different people. I found people who could help me think through how this might direct my career. And that paid off. It's important to have good mentors. It's important, I think, especially to the people on this call. I have been pleasantly surprised in my career by the number of people who would talk to me who I didn't know, who I just cold call and say, look, I just want to take you to coffee and talk to you and hear from you. Certainly in this country, people are willing to do that. I hope that's also true in Brazil. And it's made a big impact on my career trajectory.
Yes, and I think this is my double militancy. Can I say this? Like, you know, I'm a doctor. I am a scientist. I sat on the bench in Vanderbilt for long years, and to put myself into the idea of a patient, that was my big trouble, you know, because people, sometimes I feel that even I like Luis Correa, our big name here in the media and scientific media in Brazil and elsewhere. He said, but where are the universities? Where are sometimes the medical societies? People don't feel that they are civil society. Civil society is the poor. Civil society is the needed. No. So to make sure that I understand that I am civil society, doctor or not doctor, doesn't matter. So if we don't use my power as a doctor, as a citizen, who is going to run this country? Who is going to run this show? Only the bad guys, as normally what they get. So I think I would like very much to see more interchange between university, medical society, and patients, more than it is now. More, because then we are all civil society. And sometimes even this guy say, look, the civil society out there, what the hell? No, I think people should sit in the same bench at once in their life to see what can be done.
Wow. Wow to both of you. And I think those last comments were really quite inspirational and incredibly helpful to our scholars and to all the audience members that are listening. I know time is very valuable to both of you. We don't want to keep you past the time that you have committed to us. So on behalf of everyone at Dimension Sciences, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to close out by informing our participants that they can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. We have a website, and we would love for everyone to learn more about us, to write one letter or make one phone call, read one article, and if you can find it in your heart to adopt a scientist, make a small donation to us, because all of our funding does go towards supporting our scientists. So thank you everyone for being here today. We appreciate you. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Maira. Thank you so much for your time and wisdom. And we will see everyone else at our next public event. Ciao.
Great.
Good
Ciao.
morning.
Have a good week.
Bom dia. Have a good week.